Hello, welcome back to Effing with the Ineffable. I am Zoe,
And I am Smokey Piggleton,
aka
aka Will.
Will, and welcome back. I was just telling my dad
Welcome.
it's been kind of a tough week here. So I'm just feeling a little mentally unable to. I don't want to talk about anything heavy today because there's just been a lot of heaviness lately. So we're going to talk about a fun topic that my dad doesn't even know about in a
I'm
minute.
gobsmacked.
But first of all, you actually started work this week. How was that?
I did. I got to see some of my actual subjects of my work, and it was fun. It felt good to actually ply my craft.
Good. Were most of the people, because you're doing substance abuse counseling and they haven't had any substance abuse counseling since November, if I'm remembering.
That's correct.
Were most of them pretty happy to be there and being able
I
to?
Yeah, I think they're ready to go. It's interesting being working in the prison. I can see a little different dynamic going on. It's not that um, distinct from how a lot of the work in outpatient goes, which is a lot of people are ordered into treatment.
Yeah.
They recognize that they need it, but they resent that they're ordered to it. So there's this weird ambivalence
Yeah.
uh, to
Like
it.
it's like
It's
what we
it's
talked
kind of
about.
it's kind of like the mask mandate. It's like, don't tell me what to do. I'll do it on my own.
Or even I was gonna say, like we talk about all the time about how like obeying the government is not really like a virtue. It's not charity when you are being forced to give your money from the government. It's like I will gladly give some of my money away, but I'm not going to do
Mhm,
it gladly when you're stealing it from me at gunpoint. It's kind of the
mhm.
same thing. It's like I recognize I have a problem and I need help, but you infantilizing me and taking away my autonomy and telling me that I have to do this thing, it just
Yeah.
makes me more resentful. But hopefully they can still benefit from it and try to accept the
Right.
reality that they're
Yeah. Hopefully they can get an attitude, and that's the problem with a lot of these folks is they've always felt disempowered. They've always felt that they haven't had many options as far as uh, ways to manage their life, and so now uh, it's they kind of automatically resent anybody trying to tell them what to do, but they also recognize that they've mismanaged their what what opportunities they have had to manage their life, they've mismanaged.
yeah.
So it's kind of a catch 22. It's like, don't tell me what to do, but I have no idea what I should be doing.
Yeah.
So so
So
so the most important thing is developing a relationship where they start to feel like, oh, okay, this person isn't here to boss me, to dominate me, to manipulate me, to gaslight me. This person is just here to help empower me, and maybe I can do some things differently going forward, living life on my own terms,
yeah.
liberating people, because whoever serves the body, and especially anybody who is serves an addiction, isn't really a free person. They're not really living their life on their own terms. They're living their life to maintain this habit.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say it's so this book came out this week.
ah
Jordan Peterson's second, not his second book, but his follow-up to 12 Rules for Life, which have you read 12 Rules for Life?
I read the cover.
It's very good.
i
12
read I read some of it.
It's really good. It's it honestly changed my life, that book. And this book I'm only on rule 1. I'm like about 25 pages into it or something. But man, he is such a good writer. Even he wrote this even when he was suffering with some serious health issues. And he's still just so clear, and the way he explained, he's just incredible. I love Jordan Peterson so much.
Yeah, I know you do it, and I concur. I really admire his. I admire his intelligence
Yeah.
and his, clear, logical way of presenting things, and he makes it interesting. And if you can sit through somebody lecturing for 2.5 hours on the first 3 lines of Genesis,
Yeah.
He's got to be a pretty good presenter.
I was gonna say though, the very first thing he talks about in this book, the first rule, is do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievement. That's rule number 1. But it was interesting because one of the first things he talked about was one of his clients you should all get the book and buy it. It's very good. But one of his clients that he talked to for like, probably over 10 years, was very socially isolated and didn't have a lot of contact with other people. His wife had died like a long time ago. His 2 children had grown up and left the country. He had like a relationship with somebody who ended up dying in a car accident, tragically. So he just was like very socially isolated, didn't talk to a lot of people. And as a result, he didn't have a lot of good social, like, he couldn't have a conversation very well. He wasn't practiced.
He understood words. He was capable of it. He just wasn't in the habit of it.
Yeah. And he said he would get very angry, kind of violently angry if he ever got interrupted. And so Jordan Peterson realized, he said he kind of realized over time, like, they could have a really productive conversation if they met like either once a week or once every 2 weeks for an hour. He's like, if I just sat there completely quiet for the first 50 minutes and just let them talk, then we could have like a decent normal conversation for the last 10 minutes. But I think it kind of goes back to what you're saying about you have to develop a relationship with somebody of like trust. And it's for him, it was almost like he needed to get out a lot of his thoughts, and then he could realize like, okay, you are listening to me. You're not just trying to like find the next chance to talk to me or whatever. And now we can actually dialogue and like work on some of my problems. And he said he made tremendous progress over the time that they were like had a counseling relationship together. Socialization is such an important thing. I was thinking yesterday about how at the beginning of the pandemic, one of my daughters had a couple of social issues that was kind of worrying to me. And because we didn't play with other kids for like 6 months, it never got addressed in time. And it made me like really nervous. I was like, is this just going to be a thing forever? But I was thinking last night, I was like, okay, now after 6 months of like consistent socialization, consistent play groups and hanging out with people, like I feel like the problem's completely resolved. But it was just crazy that because of that period of time with the pandemic where we weren't talking with people, and there's still kids out there who aren't really seeing other people and aren't really socializing in a meaningful way. And not just kids, but adults too. Yeah.
Well, but especially kids, because I mean, there's like there's a window of opportunity to develop a lot of these skills and develop a lot of a sense of self and a sense of give and take in the dynamics of a relationship, that if it doesn't get developed, people just become more and more weird and eccentric.
Yeah.
And you ever watch the movie, what was it called, Nell?
I know what you're talking about, but I've never seen it. Where she was like raised by wolves?
No, she was raised by a mother who had had a stroke, And so the mom cock and so Nell grew up thinking that that was how to talk, and so she had all these bizarre words, and they were like in, you know, the middle of nowhere in Tennessee or something
Yeah.
like that. And so she really didn't know how to talk. She really didn't know how to converse with anybody. She didn't really even understand most of the English language as it
For some
is
reason, I thought she
spoken.
was raised by wolves. I thought I had heard that, but apparently not.
Close enough. Not quite raised by wolves, not quite a Romulus and Remus story, but
Oh, Lord.
a mom who had like an
Yeah.
aphasia because of her stroke,
Yeah.
and spoke almost incoherently.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What else? Did anything else interesting happen to you this week?
Well, speaking of living in the deep woods, I found this place came available on Zillow.
Mm-hmm. You're always looking on Zillow for the next place.
I'm always looking on Zillow for this place, and this was perfect.
Yeah.
Very remote it was completely surrounded by national forest. I'm not even sure how to access the parcel.
Because
Are
there roads to it even?
It was some acres, and there was this old wooden log cabin on it. I looked this morning. It's not even listed. It's not even on the market. I don't know what happened to it. I don't think it's sold that quickly. So I don't know what happened. But I put in a call to the realtor to see, what's the deal with this? Why is this property come and gone already? And
okay, so I don't know what we were just talking about. My dad got a call from the realtor that we had just talked about before, and we had a interruption there. But now we're back. Do we have anything else to talk about before we get into our topic? I don't think I have anything.
Well, we could talk about whether it's fair that the United States government owns so much national forest. How do they get to own it, and it doesn't become available to the public?
The property that my dad wanted that was very remote, turns out that it is going to be owned by the government again.
It's going to be purchased by this conservancy group who's going to then sell it to the national forest, so it becomes part of the national forest. I think they like to do that. They absorb as much of the stuff to keep it contiguous as possible.
I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of weird to have a bunch of national forests and then like an island in the middle of like you doing your thing. I don't know. Like, I don't.
Why does it make sense for the government to have a national forest in the first place?
It doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't unless people don't. So like, here's an example.
It would make sense for this conservancy group to buy up a lot of contiguous property and maintain it as a wilderness if they wished, as an undeveloped area. But it doesn't make sense for the government to do that. That should not be the government's business.
Yeah, I agree. The government shouldn't be able to buy it from them. If somebody wants to buy land and donate it to the government or whatever, like I'm pretty sure, so at Mount Vernon,
the government shouldn't be holding property.
Even DC? See, this is a question that I got into with a bunch of my friends about should DC become a state, which we can talk about some other time. But so Mount Vernon is owned by it's privately owned by these. It's called like the Mount Vernon Ladies Association or something, who they maintain it all. But the land, there's a big oh gosh, the river that goes through, what's the
Potomac?
River? The Potomac, thank you. I live here, I should know that. But the Potomac goes right through like his backyard basically, and then across there is a big kind of national forest called Piscataway National Park, and they were like, I think like a factory wanted to buy that land and turn it into a factory, but I think from what I've heard, a really wealthy woman bought all the land and then like donated it to be a national park, which is like, I don't really see a problem with that. Because the reason she wanted to do it is because she's like, we want to preserve, when you're looking out on the back porch of Mount Vernon, we want to preserve, like, this is what Washington would have
we want to see cherry trees. We don't want to see smokestacks.
Exactly. So anyway, we're kind of getting off into the weeds on this, but
that's a private interest. Now, this is an important libertarian subject.
Yeah.
Public property. How much should the government have as far as public property, and how much governmental resources should go to different things? The government does a lot of things, and they're able to do so because they can print money. If I start printing money, they call me a counterfeiter. If the government starts printing money, they say, hooray, the government's doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They're printing money and they're buying stuff in supposedly the name of the public good, when in fact the public good should be decided by the public through the free market. That's the libertarian. Yeah.
If you want to read a good story about why the Federal Reserve shouldn't exist and why government's printing money is bad, this is a good one. Title Twins, there's a story for everything.
It's a libertarian series.
Yeah. Jekyll Island Jekyll Island is a real place in Georgia, I think, where they created the idea for the Fed. So they talk about the creature from Jekyll Island. Anyway.
Is that Alexander Hamilton? Is he the one who, I think he had a lot to do with the federal banking and all that stuff.
He started the first federal bank, I believe. But I don't know about like the Federal Reserve and printing money. I don't know like when that kind of started.
That whole control of money, that's a dangerous thing that the government does.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that they're just printing money and money and money. I mean, they're talking about another stimulus for another, $1.9 trillion or something. I mean, they've already spent more than the GDP this year.
Well, here's the problem. When the government, it's like, we talk about this again and again and again, but the government...
I know, but it's an issue. It's a constant issue.
But the government creates problems, which it then has to solve, which then creates more problems. The government imposed all these lockdowns on places and saying businesses are not allowed to open. You're not allowed to operate your business. You're only allowed to operate your business at 25% capacity or whatever. Then it's like, okay, now my business has failed. The government has to do something about it since they were the one who caused the problem. Well, we'll just give you a stimulus. Okay, but that's causing a problem because you're stealing money from the future. And
right.
Yeah. So one of the businesses that my friends really love and support they have to completely go out of business. Now they're like $70,000 in debt because they have not been able to do their commerce. They haven't been able to make rent since August because they've only been able to operate at 25% capacity. They've been turning people away. It's not like their business failed because their business model was bad. It's not a failing. It's not a failing business. It's just that the government has put so many restrictions on it that it can't make a profit. It can't sustain itself. So, they're all pretty upset about that, which I completely understand. And actually, this kind of goes into the topic that I wanted to talk about today. Good. Which is the libertarianism or lack of libertarianism of states. Like comparing the states as to how free each, like, relatively free states are.
It's a topic that's very pertinent right now because there's a lot of states that are saying, you know what, the cause for a quarantine and a shutdown is well over. There is not a danger that the hospitals are going to be overwhelmed with new cases at this point. And so we do not any longer need to be imposing restrictions. People can decide for themselves how they want to be healthy and how they don't. So there's some states that are going that way.
Yeah.
And there's some states that are going, oh no, people can't decide for themselves. People are way too stupid to figure out how to protect themselves from an illness like this. And so we have to continue to mandate masking and social distancing and
shutting down businesses.
Don't let restaurants or bars or concerts function as usual.
So there's three things that kind of inspire, and my dad didn't even know that we were doing this topic today, but there's three things that kind of inspired this topic for me thinking about it. The first was my dad sent me a speech from CPAC from the governor of South Dakota,
Kristi
Noem, who is awesome, and she obviously cares about freedom for her constituents. And that got me thinking, I was like, man, I want to move to South Dakota. That sounds great. So that got me thinking about, like, you know, kind of comparing states as far as how much they care about individual liberty. The second one was, like you said, Texas and Mississippi both announced this week that they're completely rescinding their mask policies, which I thought was really, I thought it was funny.
Gasp. Do they hate their people? Do they want them all to die? Why don't they just shoot everybody?
I thought it was so funny because I was like, good for them, that's great. And then I saw this thing from the Babylon Bee, which said, like, Texas governor rescinds unconstitutional mask mandate that he imposed. And I was like, it is true. Like, they're the ones who are doing this in the first place. But, like, I think it's better to at least backtrack and say we're not going to do it anymore than just to stick to your guns or whatever. So those were the two things. The third thing is that my husband and I have been thinking about this a lot because we are applying for jobs all over the country and we are trying to find a place to move. And we've had a lot of conversations about this because we live in Maryland. Now, we live in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is like one of the most liberal cesspools of a county in the entire US. Like, I'm not kidding. It really truly is.
Why do you say cesspool? It's a liberal paradise. It's a liberal Eden.
If you're a liberal, then yeah, it will be your Eden. For me, a libertarian, it is a cesspool. It makes me very upset. So anyway, the whole point is, it's hard because I've talked about this before, but I really like my community of friends that I've made here. I like my church. We have like good friends, and I like a lot of things about living here. But the lack of freedoms in living here it really is restrictive, and after a while it takes a toll on you. So I don't know, we've just been talking about it a lot, and we might end up living here for a few more years, but we don't want to live here.
Moscow's pretty leftist still too, so it's
so anyway, I started doing some research and I was like, I wonder what the most libertarian state is. Now, here's the
Alaska's getting there.
Here's the issue with this is it really depends on how you define libertarianism. There's certain states that have much more, that rank much higher in terms of one aspect of libertarianism than another. And there's a really good, I'm going to link like a million things below, but there's a really good website. I think it's called...
Is this like the libertarian list of the best places to live in America?
Pretty much. I mean, There's let me look it up real quick.
Without regard to health care or cost of living or things like that. You're talking about just how is the state government structured in a way that either promotes liberty or infringes on it?
So there's a website called freedominthe50states.org. I think it's put on, there's some sort of like anyway, it's a great website. You should go on and you should play around with it. It's really fun. Actually, why don't I just share the screen and go to it right now, because it's a pretty fun website. I will show you how it works, and then I will oops, hold on. Oh, .org, not .com. Okay, sorry. Let me try to share my screen. Can you see that now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this is Freedom in the 50 States. Now, this is ranking. They pick their own.
I'm guessing the black is bad.
Yeah. So, if you see here on the bottom, it says bottom 5 is the darker colors, orange is the top 5 colors. And
Isn't that weird? Look it up in the Northeast how.
Oops.
There's.
Hold on. Sorry.
There's different. I mean, there's a contrast between some solid black going on there and then some orange.
Yeah,
right
so
next to it.
like New York is the worst, ranks the worst for freedom overall.
Really? I would have thought maybe California. Oh, there
California is 48. Hawaii is 49.
Wow,
So,
Hawaii, huh?
Yeah, I guess Hawaii has extremely restricted gun laws, as far as I'm aware.
Oh, okay.
But this is saying that Florida is overall the #1 most free state in the nation.
Nice.
Number 2 is New Hampshire.
You've been looking at Florida for
yes,
for
Florida is one of the places where my husband has been applying. 3
is New Hampshire, is that the one that has the live free or die as their slogan?
I think it is. Yeah, they're pretty hardcore there.
Yeah, good.
Indiana is number 3, which really surprised me. I wouldn't think.
Kind of surprises me too. Yeah, but
I wouldn't think Indiana. And then Colorado is number 4 and Nevada is number 5. And I did a little bit of research and I'll tell you why each one of these got them. I do want to say, however, I think if you, Alaska is number 15. Now, the reason Alaska ranks so low on this list relatively is that it said 25% of the, over 25% of the workforce in Alaska is employed by either state or local governments. So if that wasn't true, I think that Alaska would be really high because they have 3 different categories of freedom that they rank all the states on. Fiscal, or I guess like either economic or fiscal, regulatory, and personal. Those are the 3 categories of ranking. Alaska is number 1 in personal freedom. Like they're just like, if you, as far as like stuff like
you can grow opium poppies there and make your own heroin. Go ahead, sell it to anybody who feels it's pretty free market, pretty laissez-faire.
Personal freedom. Some examples of the personal freedom indexes that they're trying to rank are like helmet and seatbelt laws, homeschooling regulations, gun laws, alcohol and tobacco laws. That kind of stuff is all kind of under the category of personal freedom. So Florida is number 1, which I think is interesting. And then if you click on each state, it'll show you kind of how they've started. I think they started ranking this in 2000, and it shows you how the states ranked through time. They update this list every year, I guess. at least until 2016. And then if you go down, it'll tell you some state facts, it'll tell you the analysis, and then it'll tell you policy recommendations for how to be even more libertarian, basically, or at least more free. And this is done by the Cato.
Oh, this is done by Cato Institute. Okay,
yes.
Cool.
So I really like this website. It's really fun. And a fun thing to do too is if you go, so let's go home again. So there's certain things at the top here. So let's say you only care about personal freedom. You can click personal, and then it re-ranks them based on this stuff. So like Maine, I guess, is extremely high up for personal freedom. Some of these numbers I was taking from a couple years ago. So some of the numbers like in my notes are going to be a little bit off. This is saying Maine is number 1. Nevada is number 2, which makes sense because Nevada has extremely limited gambling laws, and it's the only state, I believe it's the only state where prostitution is legal.
Is that right?
Depending on I think it depends on the county, but it's the only state where like you can choose to have prostitution be legal.
Cool.
New Mexico, Colorado, and then New Hampshire. So anyway, and then see, Texas is number 50 for personal, which I think is really interesting. I think part of it is because personal also includes stuff like marriage laws and that kind of stuff. And because Texas is so conservative, they're going to have more regulations for things.
They're going to infringe on some of those.
Yeah.
In some of those right side rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think it's fun to go on here and play around. Like education is something that's really, really important to me. So when I go on and look at certain states that I think are important, like here, so sorry, this is just it's so fun, and it's so fun.
You're not even really that interested in public education, right?
No, but education also involves homeschooling regulation, which is very important to me.
Oh, okay. Requirements and restrictions for private and home schools. Okay.
Yes. So if you go to personalize, I highly recommend everybody does this because it's pretty fun. You can pick your variables. So like if you go here, you can pick, what do you care about? Like, how do you want to rank these certain things? Like, see, there's just so many options of things in each one of these. So even if you go to educational freedom, look at all the different categories of things that you can rank, even just within educational freedom, like homeschooling record keeping, homeschooling notification, homeschooling standardized testing, homeschooling teacher qualifications. Like there's so many interesting things that you can play around with, and you can even pick like, where is one here? You can pick the weight percentage of how much you want it to matter.
Wow.
Yeah, like this is a very detailed website, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, you can really personalize it. Yeah.
So I think it's a fun website to mess around with. I wanted to just point out some of the top 10 states that, not just from this website, but kind of overall, that I think are worth talking about as far as top libertarian states. Number 1 would be Florida, which is on here. Florida has no income tax, which is obviously a big deal, less theft, so that's good. It is good for educational freedom. When as you maybe saw when I clicked on it, it's in the top 5, but they do have a fair bit of homeschooling regulation. Not as much as some places, but they do have some substantial homeschool regulation, so it's not the best, but it's a pretty good state to live in, and there's a lot of categories that it ranks very highly in. Number 2 that I wanted to mention was New Hampshire. I've never been to New Hampshire, but I guess New Hampshire has.
I don't know that I've ever been to New Hampshire either. I don't think I probably have. I've been as far up and over as Massachusetts, but I've never been to. I don't think I've ever been to New Hampshire.
I guess New Hampshire has just like I guess they're economically they have a lot of low regulation as far as I can tell. They also have, as far as I like, once again, some of these notes are from a while ago, so some of this might have changed. Things are changing all the time, but no seatbelt laws or motorcycle helmet laws. So if that's something that you really care about, New Hampshire might be a place that you want to live. Another state, Alaska, like I said, it's #1 in personal freedom. The only real, and I think, I wish you could see, do they have, I want to see, do they have guns on here as something? Okay, so guns. See, I'm surprised that Alaska is #9 for guns, because I think they have pretty low regulations for guns. Even Vermont, which is a fairly regulated state, has very low restrictions on guns. It's #2.
Thanks, Bernie.
Kansas, weirdly, is the #1 state for gun laws, I guess.
Woohoo!
So,
yes, we Kansas.
And you might notice, if you pay careful attention, a lot of the things that I care about, Arizona is in the top 5, which is very interesting to me. Like,
We've got a friend in Arizona now.
I know, and I've never really thought about living in Arizona before, but I'm like, let's see if we go to, I believe Arizona is also, it's #1 for educational freedom. I think like their homeschooling regulation is pretty low. So it's like, maybe we should move to Arizona. I don't know if I could handle the heat, to be honest. So,
Arizona has mountains too. I mean, you can get up out of the heat.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. Like my husband and I took a long trip kind of all through here, a long road trip. And like Utah and Arizona are both beautiful places to live. So kind of going back to
the Western deserts, huh?
Yeah.
You ever read, this is kind of off topic, but there was the Monkey Wrench Gang.
It sounds familiar. Yeah, I don't think I've read it though.
It's a novel about these guys who were kind of, it's from the 60s. It's about these people who were sabotaging developments in the desert. They were like, we want to keep the desert.
Free.
Yeah. So they were sabotaging different things around the Grand Canyon and stuff. It's a funny book.
Yeah. I'll have to check it out. I think that Texas is a really interesting state because, like I said, it's a very conservative state. So as far as kind of things like let's just go to, do they have like marriage on here? So Texas is,
well, now they would probably have fairly restrictive abortion laws, which some people would consider to be important.
Yeah,
I don't like a freedom.
Yeah.
Other people would consider that to be a positive.
Yeah. I don't know if abortion is one of the things on here that you can personalize. There's actually one of my biggest libertarian issues is not something that you can personalize on this map, which is medical freedom. Laws about vaccine exemptions.
And yeah, that's interesting because that's something that Mom was talking about this morning is what's the ethics of refusing vaccines? Like I know that a lot of the folks I talk to in the prison, they're refusing vaccines. They don't want anything to do with vaccines. They don't want anything to do with anything that the authorities are willing to promote to them. They look at as being, they're almost automatically like, oh, if they're giving it to us, it's probably bad for us.
Yeah.
It's like Tuskegee Airmen paranoia, which is, it's not paranoia when they're actually
when it's justified.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's something that's something we should devote an entire episode to, because I have myriad thoughts on vaccines and the ethical implications of refusing versus taking vaccines as far and
Yeah, do we have an obligation to take it, not just for our own health, but for the public good? But should it be mandated? No. Should we consider whether we are doing it just for ourselves or whether it is a sacrifice for others? If we're doing it as a sacrifice for others, it's a virtue. And so we maybe ought to consider it. But like you said, if you're doing it just because you're concerned about whether the law is going to get you, or whether you're doing the right, if you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, you're virtuous. If you're doing the right thing because you're afraid that the boogeyman's going to get you, then you're a coward.
Yeah. Let's talk about that another time, because honestly, I think it deserves its own topic. Although, if you
All
are
right.
interested, we did talk
Park
about
that.
what?
We'll park that one.
Okay. We did talk about the COVID vaccine in our in a past episode. So if you're interested, you can talk. But I do think it'd be interesting to talk more generally about vaccines, because the COVID it's just kind of a different thing. Okay, I don't remember where I was. Where was I talking about Texas?
Yeah, you were talking about Texas and how conservative it is.
So,
We also asked, is it possible to personalize about abortion? Is that something
yeah. So
that
that's
some people that is their hot button topic?
yeah. I mean, it is. It's actually a hot button topic for me. I actually don't know if I would care so much about living in a state with those regulations. Like, I think that's important, but I guess I just view it more as like, this is an issue we have to deal with culturally, rather than, I mean, we have to deal with both, but I think the cultural issues are more important than the governmental issues when it comes to abortion. I'm not saying that it's not important. I am saying that it's important. I go to the March for Life every year because I want our government to recognize that it's not okay to kill unborn babies. However, living somewhere where the culture of life is respected is probably more important to me than living somewhere where the law dictates one way or the other.
That's true. And it reflects that sense of, is it a virtue or is it an obligation?
Yeah. And so keep in mind when you're looking at this website is really fun to play around with, but you do have to keep in mind there are some issues that people care about that aren't on here, or there's lots of issues that I don't personally really care about that are on here. So abortion laws aren't, as far as I can tell from looking around on it yesterday, I don't think there's anything on there. And also the medical freedom thing. But Texas is pretty high in personal freedom. They have pretty good educational freedom, low alcohol regulations. They have one of the smallest state governments in the union, and low taxes. They're also apparently the only state in the union where employers are not required to pay for workers' compensation, not required to contribute to workers' compensation. They're really great for businesses. Like, there's a mass exodus of businesses moving from California to Texas to try to set up headquarters there, because it's the regulation and the taxes are just so much more, so much better for businesses. And also, it has to be noted that whole the lifting of the mask mandate this week, that for some people that's a really big deal. For me, medical freedom is a really big deal. I have a friend who completely became libertarian just because of the issue of medical freedom. So Texas seems like a pretty good place to live. Let's move on to another state that I think is really good, which is Colorado. And Colorado is number 4 overall right now. Colorado has pretty low taxes. The website I was reading said they have the most decentralized economy. I don't really know what that means and how they're measuring that, but I guess that's something to consider. They have low sin taxes, and they have decriminalized marijuana. They weirdly have a lot of bans on tobacco, though. Like marijuana, they have low regulation, but I guess tobacco, they have a lot of restrictions.
How contradictory is that?
I know, very weird. But it should be noted, this is a fun fact, I guess that Colorado is the state which is the birthplace of the Libertarian Party in like 1971 or something. Libertarian Party meaning like the actual political party, not like the philosophy. Sorry, I missed a state in between there too. I kind of tried to rank these in order of kind of most free to least free as far
You got
as.
Indiana.
Well, so
you talked about Indiana. That it's like, why is Indiana on there?
Indiana will be coming up, but one of the states that I wanted to mention too is South Dakota. South Dakota, which is right here, it's number 8 overall on this ranking. Very gun friendly, very gambling friendly, and once again, my dad just sent me an article about how the governor. Sorry, I'm moving this over because I'm in the sun. The governor, I guess, is kind of lowering the restrictions on hunting, especially for underage people, which is some people really care about hunting.
And it's not just citizens of South Dakota. Anybody who is under the age of 18 can hunt and fish for free within the boundaries of South Dakota.
Yeah. So, and also it should be noted that they don't have any mask mandates, and they didn't mandate that businesses shut down during the pandemic. They're number 1 in economic freedom, apparently, at least at the time of this article. And the one problem is they have a high amount of control over private schools, which I find kind of weird. So that's kind of contradictory. The next state I wanted to talk about was Indiana. It kind of has low rankings. If you look at the fiscal, the regulatory, and the personal, in all 3 of those rankings, it's relatively low. So, it's or relatively high ranking as far as being more free. So in all 3 dimensions, it does pretty well. I guess it has very good educational policies, and especially good in regulatory policy. So Indiana making a subtle jump to the top of the list for libertarian states.
What they don't consider is the tyranny of weather.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like Hawaii.
Hawaii is number 1 for not having tyranny of weather. I mean, it'd probably be like, I can go outside any day I want in my t-shirt.
Yeah. I mean, Florida's kind of the same way, although Florida gets nasty in the summer depending on where you live.
It does. Yeah, it's pretty hot in the summer.
Yeah. Nevada, one of the top libertarian states. Like I said, gambling and prostitution, although I guess their educational restrictions are fairly high. North Dakota is a pretty good state as well. So North Dakota is actually number 6 on this list, so just misses the top 5. North Dakota has no minimum wage. Their land use is lightly restricted, and they have...
You can frack the heck out of your property there.
Yeah. And they have right to work laws, which I don't know that much about right to work laws, but I think that means that you don't have to be part of a union.
You don't have to join a union, yeah.
So that's a big deal to me and to some people. And the last one of the top 10 that I kind of wanted to highlight was Idaho. Idaho has very low gun laws. There's only 9 years of mandated schooling in Idaho, which I thought was interesting. Almost no regulation of private and home schools, And I guess they're number 4 in economic freedom. So if we go over to education, how does, like right now, see, Idaho's number 26. I wonder why. Like I said, some of this stuff is because this article was, I think this article was actually written in maybe 2019. And this is only, as far as I can tell, updated as far as 2016. So I don't know, things are changing.
It is nice that you can personalize this, because
Yeah.
there's some of this stuff that I don't care about.
Yeah, same.
You know, but personally, I don't care about it.
Yeah.
You know, philosophically, I think the more freedom in all of these areas, the better.
Yeah.
The nation was supposedly conceived in liberty, but everywhere you look, there's boots on people's throats.
Yeah. As far as the overall, like the bottom 10 states, I kind of wanted to just call them out. I didn't want to really go into the reasons why each one of these, but New York is actually the lowest by a pretty good margin. I think if you...
They're number 50.
So if you look at the overall freedom rankings, they kind of say, oh, this is the change. There's a chart that I will link in the description that kind of talked about, it showed like the actual numbers of this index of how they got these things, and it said that like New York was definitely by a large margin the last.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like it's trending higher at
Yeah.
all.
New Jersey is also, where's New Jersey? New Jersey's also
right
very
there.
low on the list. Rhode Island is very low. California is very low. And my great old state of Maryland is, of course, very low on a lot of these measures of freedom. Also low is Hawaii, Vermont, Oregon, Delaware, and New Mexico. So I thought that, you know, one of the things that my dad is very interested in is gun laws. So I thought it would be fun just to take a quick look at some of the highest and lowest states for gun laws. I think Hawaii ranks as, yeah, Hawaii is number 50. Hawaii has the most restrictive gun laws. And even, see, Florida ranks pretty low on gun laws, which is interesting. But
speaking of guns, I just got indication that my new gun was completed and it is en route.
You got another gun? I didn't even know.
This is the one that I had ordered last fall.
Wow.
It's been in process of this whole time. It's quite a gun. It's a battle rifle.
Well, I'll be excited.
It's basically a FAL.
Okay.
If anybody knows what that means, it's a FAL copy. So it's a 308 high caliber, high powered gun.
We should do a gun tour sometime where you show all your guns. Although I don't know if that's a good idea.
I was out yesterday with my bow. And
nice.
we've been practicing our knife throwing. Luke is pretty good at the hatchet throwing. He can throw the hatchets. He can peg those hatchets.
We're not going to come visit you for a while, but I'm excited. The next time we come visit, we'll have to teach my little kids to knife throw.
I've learned some of the process for getting better at it. So, you know, I think I can help teach it a little bit now. It was a pretty steep learning curve, though.
Yeah.
A lot of throws before I figured out how to start making adjustments.
Yeah. So this is kind of the ranking for guns. Kansas is number 1, which I wonder what is Kansas overall? Let's see. Overall, they're number 10, so they're pretty high up there overall. But Kansas is number 1. I think, let's see. Vermont is number 2. Arizona's number 3, Idaho's number 4, and Mississippi is number 5. So if you care about guns, that's a good kind of.
What's the incarceration?
Let's see. Incarceration. Wow, lots of
prisoners in Texas.
yes. So this is saying Massachusetts is number 1, Rhode Island number 2, Maine number 3, Minnesota number 4, and Washington number 5. Let's just look real quick. I hope this is interesting to everyone else. I thought this was pretty fun. Do they have incarceration on here? Yeah, so the categories that they look at are crime rate adjusted incarceration rate, the drug enforcement rate, arrests for non-drug victimless crimes as a percentage of the population, arrests for non-drug victimless crimes as a percentage of all arrests, driver's license suspensions, and prison collect phone call rate for 15 minutes. That's a weird. See, like that's one that I wouldn't really care about, but I don't know. Some people.
It is a matter of allowing access for prisoners to be able to keep contact with the outside world.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's important that you know, people are able to stay in touch with the people that they should be staying in touch with. The restrictions come in because people are still wanting to run crime organizations from in the slammer.
Yeah, exactly.
So that becomes a problem.
Yeah. Man, I just finished a really good book this past week called In the Time of Butterflies, by Julia Alvarez. It's about the Dominican Republic, and it's like historical fiction. It's based on these 3 people who really existed, called the Mirabal sisters. They lived in the Dominican Republic, and they basically greatly contributed to the overthrow of a dictator who was around he kind of started in like the 30s and went all the way to the 60s, named Trujillo. Man, he was so evil, and I didn't even know he existed until I like started doing a lot.
Oh yeah, I remember. Was he a general?
I think he was a general. Yeah, because he always wore like a general's coat with like a bunch of badges.
Military garb. Yeah. Was it like Manuel Trujillo or something like that?
Can't remember his first name, but he was a bad dude. He had a lot of kids, so I don't know. One of his kids might have had that name too. Anyway, real bad guy. There's a lot of time where they spend in the book where they're in prison. So it made me think of that when we were talking about prison and trying to continue the revolution even from prison. Good book.
Viva la revolution!
It's a good book. It actually was the first book I've ever read where I was like, man, I actually kind of understand now the appeal of communism, because they're living in this brutal dictatorship and they're right next to Cuba. So they see Cuba being liberated and they're like, oh, Castro and Che, these guys are great. Like, when are we going to get liberated? And
be careful what you ask for.
Exactly.
Kids.
It made me realize, like, if you're living under a brutal dictatorship where it's just one guy and at his whim you're going to get killed or not, like, communism seems pretty great. Now, if you do any research on what actually happened in the Dominican Republic, they did become communist, and then very quickly that failed and they became more of like a capitalistic, democratic.
See, and the thing that you can kind of see on this map, and as you were saying, is you know, both the more extremely left states and the more extremely right states tend to infringe on different sets of freedoms.
Yep.
And so, you know, both extremes are, you know, going to be not optimal.
Yeah.
There's going to be an optimal middle ground. Media curate is what Icarus told Daedalus. Run the middle ground. Don't fly too close to the sun and don't fly too close to the water, because either one will be deadly for you.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, if you go back to our
Or was that Daedalus killing Icarus? I don't know which one.
if you go back to our political
One told the other anyway.
if you go back to our political compass test episode, you'll see that kind of like when you get high on the authoritarian, that kind of spectrum, it's like on one side you have basically like the socialist, communist, whatever, and on the other side you have the fascists. It's like both of them are bad. They're like, just because one is to the right and one is to the left doesn't mean they're good. They're both bad.
They're both infringing on the liberties of the individual.
Yeah.
No.
So I did want to make a quick point that is not on this map about, I did some research on medical freedom and which states are best for medical freedom. It's kind of hard to tell because I'll tell you the 5 worst states for medical exemptions. These states only have medical exemptions. Only medical exemptions are allowed. You're not allowed to have vaccine exemptions for personal beliefs or religious beliefs. And that would be California, Mississippi, West Virginia, New York, and Maine. So if you care about...
Interesting, West Virginia.
I know. Mississippi too is weird because Mississippi actually has the lowest vaccination rate in the country. I don't know.
And yet they have the most restrictive vaccination.
I don't know if they started that policy because they have the lowest vaccination rate or what, but very weird. So if you care about vaccination exemptions, those are 5 states where you might not want to live. States with there's 10 states, I think, with no statewide mask orders as updated yesterday. Alaska, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska. Sorry, there's 15. North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, and Tennessee. All of those states do not have statewide mask orders. So hopefully that gave you some oversight as to the relative freedom of states. I personally was really surprised that Arizona came in the top 5 for homeschooling, for guns, and for medical freedom as far as my research. So Arizona seems like a pretty good place to live as far as I'm concerned. And I also...
Is there a separate religious freedom, or is that considered under like...
That's another one that I don't... Maybe that would be regulatory. Like, let's go to personalized and just see really quick. Marriage freedom, educational, alcohol.
They must have considered it.
Would it be under regulatory? Lawsuit, land use, occupational health insurance. It doesn't really seem like they have. That's another one that would be important to me, and it's not really listed here.
Right.
So
that was the whole reason for the founding of the United States, was religious freedom and mission.
For sure. Yeah. I think maybe just because that's more of like a federal issue. I don't know if there's a lot of laws like variation in state as far as, although there are ones about like,
because it's constitutionally protected,
and like separation of church and state and that kind of stuff. I think if the Equality Act passes, which I'm pretty sure it's not going to pass, but if the Equality Act passes, that would maybe change things.
Well, I think there's already in practice some states that are a lot more willing to step on religious freedoms. I imagine Texas is not one of them, but I imagine California is one of them, since I know that California sued the government over protections for the Little Sisters of the Poor, because the California wanted to assure that the Little Sisters of the Poor were going to provide reproductive health care rights, and the government said they have an exemption. And it's like, they shouldn't.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have an exemption. So there's certain states that are already a little bit more predatory in terms of religious issues.
Yeah, that would be another one that I would like to see on here indexed. I think that would be a good thing to look at. Is there any other state issue or anything that you want to look at before I stop my screen sharing?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I did want to make
it's an interesting site, and I do love Cato.
Yeah.
It's a good organization.
I thought it was a fun site to play around on. I did want to say that I looked up so this is according to the 2018 Economic Freedom Rankings for countries. I thought it would be interesting to look at the relative. Now, this is just economic freedom. This is not personal freedom. This is just economic. The top 10 from 1 to 10.
And the way this is calculated is,
I don't know, but I'll link it below because you can
freedom of market, lower taxation.
I think so.
Lower regulation, stuff like that.
I think kind of all that stuff. I'll definitely link all this. So if you want to do some more research, you can look.
I don't.
Okay. Let's go from 10 to 1 just for fun.
All right.
Do you have any guesses as to more economically free countries?
More economically free countries. I'm guessing a lot of the third world countries are economically pretty free.
Well, let's look. So 10 to 1, Australia, the United Kingdom.
Really?
Yes, which is kind of, I mean, they did break from the EU, although this is 2018. Remember, this is 2018. So I take it for what it's worth. I
always thought they had pretty high tax rates and such.
I don't know. They're not, I mean,
somebody's got to keep the queen and corgis. I don't know.
Number 3 is, I don't even
Those
know
corgis ain't gonna feed themselves.
I don't even know how to pronounce this country, but it's like Mauritius?
Yeah.
Mauritius? I don't know. Some weird, like literally, I know almost nothing about that country.
Isn't it like an island country?
I think it's like a really small island.
Yeah, maybe in the Indian Ocean.
This is like how little I know about geography. I don't know anything. Number 4 is the country of Georgia, not the state of Georgia.
Not the state.
Or sorry, that's number. If we're going from 10 to 1, it's number 7. Number 6 is the United States. So we got some room to improve here. Number 5 is Ireland. Number 4 is Switzerland. Interesting.
The Swiss are pretty renowned for not having a lot of regulation over their banking and stuff like that.
That's true. Like Swiss bank accounts, you always hear about that. Number 3 is New Zealand. Number 2 is Singapore. And the very top at number 1 is Hong Kong. So I don't know. Interesting. It also,
I'm not sure that's true anymore. Since 2018, didn't they have, there's been a lot of stuff hitting the fan from Beijing has been blowing a lot of Wuhan business down Hong Kong's way.
It would be, I'd really like to see like a 2020 updated list of all of those.
I think the Chinese have been clamping down on Hong Kong. I'm not sure it's quite as free as it used to be.
I do think
New Zealand's not quite as free as it used to be either. They've instituted a gun grab.
Now remember though, this is only economic.
Right.
It's not personal freedom. So like gun laws and stuff, that wouldn't be counted.
I'm just saying that's that's been a recent change too, is that New Zealand decided that they were going to take away all the guns. And
Also,
again, it's in response to they had some kind of um, mass shooting, and so they said, oh, I guess people can't be trusted with guns. We're going to take them all away.
yeah.
Well, I guess that one person couldn't be trusted with a gun. They were probably on the wrong end of a gun. They needed to be on the receiving end rather than the sending end.
I do think yeah, I think a lot of these countries have a lot of kind of personal freedom aspects that they would rank pretty low on. But once again, just take it with a grain of salt. It's just for fun. But I do think if you go to the website that I'll link, I found it very
For
interesting.
countries?
For countries. I found it interesting that they showed a graph, and it was economic freedom and income per capita. So like on the bottom, it had states more free, and then it had more GDP, and the line was like perfectly like that. The freer you have, the more GDP you have per capita, like, which makes complete sense to us. But I just think it's very interesting that
the free market allows people to create wealth, to use capital in a way that continues to create wealth, not just for themselves, but it accrues to other people too.
Yeah.
The tides raise all ships.
Yep. So I don't know. I hope this was like interesting. I think it's kind of just fun to play around with. It's fun to think about as far as where we actually want to live, because we've kind of been thinking about Florida even before I did any of this research, because if you just think about it, I know that Florida's mask policies have been very what do I want to say? They haven't had a lot of strict mask policies. Right now, they don't have a statewide mask order. Businesses have been fairly open for a while.
Well, I know that Grandma and Grandpa have gone to Florida.
Yep.
One big reason why Grandma and Grandpa chose Florida is the income tax.
Yeah. That's why a lot of rich people go there. A lot of rich old people go to Florida because the weather's nice and there's no income tax, and yeah.
And I know Ben Shapiro moved there too.
Yep.
So and I believe Donald Trump is down there. So all the greatest people that we know.
Oh Lord.
The 3 greatest people that we know. Grandpa, Ben Shapiro, and Grandma.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. This was kind of more of just a fun episode. I didn't have the mental capacity to do a tough one today, but I do think we should, at some point, we need to talk about vaccination and talking about the libertarian and Catholic views of vaccination. Oh, we should do one about the best states to live in if you're a Catholic. That would be a fun one. Also, I think Florida ranks pretty high up there. They have a couple of like Catholic universities in Florida, and
I think they actually there was a couple of Catholic communities that were developed, places that were developed specifically by Catholics for Catholics, and they wanted to have, they wanted to kind of have some sense of being able to manage their culture there.
Yeah.
Which is a good idea. I mean, that's not a bad idea at all. People who are like-minded, people who feel like they want to be in a community together ought to join together, and and then they can become autonomous. You can say, okay, well, this is we're not affiliated with the United States anymore. We're the Vatican West
state. Yeah, we're sovereign citizens. I mean, it's like what we were talking about before, about how when colonies came over here and started the different states of the United States, a lot of them were based on religious freedom, like Maryland
exactly was a Catholic enclave,
and now it's a now it's a liberal hellhole. No,
Now it's a cesspool.
but
Wait, I mean in Eden.
I'm gonna look at. I don't know if there's a lot of ways that you could rank what the best state is for being a Catholic, except to say that like
Proportion of Catholics, I guess.
yeah, and like
Although New York, I think, has a lot of Catholics, and they're pretty lib,
yeah,
pretty leftist.
yeah. So I don't know. That one would probably be too hard to look up. But I do think we should talk about vaccinations, and we should talk about one thing that we talked about off air that I want to talk about is the whether people follow the law to be virtuous or whether they follow the law out of cowardice. I think that's a good something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. But I hope this gave you some stuff to think about, and maybe if you live in a statist state, that you might want to consider moving to a different one, or at least try to get some policies implemented in your state that would make it more free.
Yeah.
And definitely check out that website and play around with it, because I think it's really fun. Yeah, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, last thing, shout out to Murray Rothbard, who would apparently have been 90 something this past week. I wasn't all that familiar with him, but I know he's been a big name in American libertarianism. And I read a few different articles about him this week. Sounds like he was a pretty cool guy.
I think one of the Tuttle Twins books is based on a Rothbard book. Let me look real quick. I don't know that much about Rothbard either, but yeah, I mean, I've obviously heard the name. Here, this one called The Fate of the Future is based on, here he is.
There he is. You know who he looks like? He looks like the old dude from Up.
He does look like the old guy from Up. He wrote Anatomy of the State. Yeah, it says he was born in, well, this says he was born in 1926.
Yeah, in March what?
Well,
Does it say?
It just says 1926, but that would mean he's like, what, 95?
I believe it was March 2nd. So they were just celebrating his birthday on that Mises.org.
Yeah.
They had mentioned him.
Here's a quote from him. If the bulk of the public were really convinced of the illegitimacy of the state, if it were convinced that the state is nothing more or less than a bandit gang writ large, then the state would soon collapse to take on no more status or breadth of existence than another mafia gang.
Amen.
Hard. Anatomy of the State. So he was an economist, historian, political theorist, leading thinker in what became the modern libertarian and anarcho-capitalist movements. Author of over 20 books, he was a consistent champion of personal freedom and free markets and a reliable critic of harmful government intervention. His essay, Anatomy of the State, is a short, succinct expose of how this popular yet predatory system of governance violates our rights, destroys civilization, and ultimately threatens the lives and property of those who are subject to its power. So, if you want to get some good background on libertarian principles, I will once again promote Tuttle Twins. I think they're awesome.
And I will promote, actually, for adults, reading the source material. Hayek, Mises, Rothbard, etc.
Well, if you're like me and most of the reading that you do is
to
your children, it's a good. Tuttle Twins just came out with a board book set for like toddlers and infants called like the ABCs of freedom, the ABCs of something else. I don't know. So anyway,
they ought to have a scratch and sniff. Let's see how the leftists smell. Ew! Let's see how the fascists smell. Ow! How do the libertarians smell? Smells like rose water.
Smells like money.
Ozone.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
God bless everybody. Take care. Fight for freedom.
Amen.